Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up, I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes. This day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now, if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Okay, everyone, how are you doing? And I hope you are looking forward to this. I certainly am, and I see Wayne is making a lot of noise upstairs. Great. But besides that, get ready with your questions. I'm going to be bringing Stefan Kinsella on here, and we are going to discuss the Libertarian case against intellectual monopoly. I just wanted to give a brief kind of intro to this. I wanted to let you know that this was not an opinion that I have always held. I resisted it for a long time, and I read Stefan's works, and they convinced me. Though I never had been particularly obsessed with copyright or anything like that. Even before I rejected intellectual property, anything I wrote, I always said, do with it what you want. And I'm self-published, but I am a published author, and my books have been used at Liberty University. So, yeah, so here we go. I'm going to be bringing Stefan on, and you guys please ask your questions either in chat, or if in chat you think you want to come on, I can shoot you a link and we could bring you on the show, and we'll see how that goes, because I've never had two other people on. So let me pull up here. If I did everything right. Hello, Stefan. How are you doing?
Hey, doing very well.
And can you see the chat? Because there is a bunch of chat now, and I don't know if you can see it on your end.
I just see on the air you're in the broadcast.
Okay, well, I can pull up on screen any questions that come up because you can, shove them on the screen because on your iPad maybe you can't see it. Right now it's just a bunch of people saying hello. I do hope there will be some questions and challenges. So far we have Zoma, Tommy, Dave, Ryan, and Julian, who's my regular. If he's not in here, I just can't start without Julian. But how about you start with a little bit of like an introduction, and I'm going to introduce, ask for, objections or questions. This is what this was for. Everyone was doing the dog pile on my secretary page. And hopefully the people who were there, like saying how stupid this was, would come. And Dave says he has some questions, but he'll be polite. He's not the guy who was saying how stupid we were. So start off with a little intro and we'll get right into questions.
Sure. Okay.
Ooh, you're freezing,
So
Stefan.
okay, hold on. How's this? Am I back?
Yep, you're back. Yeah, you're back. Sarah, the comments are both on Facebook and on YouTube. I have a comment aggregator that shows me all of them.
Am I back?
Yes, you are. You are back.
I can't hear you. Hold on. Let's see here. I'm working on something.
No problem. So, Sarah, if you want to see the other comments, sometimes it's best to go to YouTube. We're just waiting for the...
Okay, let's do this.
And we did test, but the best laid plans. I never count on technology. Oh, I've got to add him back in. Okay. I've got two of you now, so I need to get rid of one of you, I think.
Yeah, let's
Here we go.
perfect.
Okay, you're dark and mysterious now.
Hold on, I'm switching to my computer, so
That's okay. You're stretching my tech skills by coming in twice.
all right. Okay, I might have to use the speakers on the computer. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Just if you use the speakers, we're gonna get feedback if you do that. I can hear it already.
I know. Give me a second. Let me go
Sure.
to my preferences and try to change the microphone settings. That's why I like to use the iPad, but it didn't work this time. Sound.
Here we're getting it worked out, and while we're waiting, and I will end up putting up the live stream. I always edit down for any technical things, so there'll be a final version that will have all of this part edited out.
Okay, I'm on my AirPods now. It's not the best,
Okay,
but
awesome.
I think that's direct. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Let's start over.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. All right. A brief introduction to. Okay. So the topic is intellectual property, right? And
Yep.
it came up because there's always debates in libertarian circles about this, and there was on one of your Facebook pages. And so I'm a Rothbardian anarchist libertarian, but I don't think that my position on IP depends upon that. I think as long as you're just a libertarian, you can see the case against IP. I'm a patent attorney, so I know a lot about the law, and I came to my current views, which is that the patent and the copyright system should be abolished about the same time that I started practicing in law, and that was around 1993, 94. So I've been publishing on it all those years. And basically, I've come to realize that the intellectual property system is completely unjust. Basically, patent and copyright laws amount to a taking of property rights from owners of property, and it's a transfer by the government to third parties who hold IP rights and who now have the ability to prevent you from using your own property as you see fit. So that's essentially the problem with it. Is the government is giving someone permission or the right to make you have permission to use your own property according to the way you want to use it. That's the essential kind of hardcore case against it. There's secondary cases, which is that the standard argument given for patent and copyright is that we need these laws to incentivize or to support the ability of creators to come up with creative and artistic works like novels and paintings and music and movies, and for inventors to come up with inventions. And that without these patent laws, there would be an underproduction of these things. I always find it a little bit weird that libertarians argue this way, because it's not like we come to this saying the purpose of government is to make sure that there's enough innovation. I mean, we always think the purpose of government is to protect our rights. And so then we have to define what our rights are, and then analyze the nature of violence and aggression and property rights and the nature of government. And that's where our libertarian views come from. But it was never to make sure that, Karen Ann Harlows can sell a novel for the right amount of money. So I'm not sure why it's always a question or a critique to say, well, I don't know how I'm going to make money selling novels if people can copy them. It's just a question. It's amusing. It's a hope. It's a wonder, but it's not an argument. Certainly not a libertarian argument. So we can go further from there if you like, but that's kind of the basic stance.
Sure, and we do have a question I'm going to put up, but to add on what you were saying, I suppose some people who are, who come to libertarianism more from a utilitarian standpoint might find that persuasive, but a strictly deontological, rights-based libertarianism, that argument never made any sense to me either. Just because an unjust law is giving you a result you like doesn't sanitize or make good the bad law. So let me put up here though, and we'll see if you can see it. Otherwise, I will read it to you. We have a comment here from Don Stacy, and I always read them out loud anyway, because I have some people who listen to my show when they're house cleaning and stuff. So it said, "Hey Stefan, old acquaintance Don Stacy here. I was recently elected to the platform committee for the Libertarian Party of Kentucky. What is your preferred wording for an LP/IP abolition plank?"
I actually have written it. I have it on my website. I'd have to look it up, and I can tell you off the top of my head. But I believe, Karen, you came up with one that was different than mine, but I liked yours too. I mean, one way to do it would be to just have a separate plank saying, I think you can't talk about intellectual property because it's such a broad term in law. So it covers patent, copyright, trademark, and trade secret, and also other things like semiconductor mask work designs and defamation law sometimes, and they all have different arguments for them and against them. And the trademark argument is harder to make because it's controversial and confusing, because if you oppose trademark law, it sounds like you're opposing fraud, which you're not, but it's hard to explain that. So I think, and the biggest two laws that do the most damage is patent and copyright. So I would simply focus on those, and I would say that the Libertarian Party opposes patent and copyright law. That would be the simplest and most direct and blunt way. But another way to do it would be the way I did it was there's a paragraph or a clause in the platform already which deals with, I think it deals with monopolies and freedom of speech. So you could build it into those, and I'd be happy to send you the link. It's on my website, c4sif.org. where I urged the Libertarian Party to do just that, and I put the wording that I propose in there.
And the wording I'm proposing for the Libertarian Party of Colorado, because I'm on the LP Colorado, I'm the chair of that platform committee. And this proposal did pass out of committee and will be presented to the delegates. It's entitled Intellectual Property. As we oppose all government intervention in the marketplace, we favor the repeal of intellectual property laws. Disputes between inventors, creators, authors, artists, businesses, and other such entities should be resolved without government intervention. And I believe that's very similar to the one that the Radical Caucus has.
Yeah, and that's good. That's good. That's good.
Though I think I might ask the committee if they want to change the title to, I like intellectual monopoly a lot better. The word property is such a shibboleth that you call something property, libertarians all of a sudden think by calling it property, it makes it property. It's like the progressives, you call healthcare a right, and all of a sudden it's a right. No, it ain't. So I like.
That's one.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Say that's one reason. That's one reason I rank IP really high with the state evils, because, like, it's even up there with the drug war and taxation and the Fed, partly because it's more insidious than those, because it's really pervasive. It pervades all of society. Once you open your eyes to it, you'll see it everywhere. This mentality. But the other problem is that, unlike all the others, it's called property, and so it fools even libertarians into thinking, well, we're for property rights and we're for capitalism, so you must be for this. Whereas there's no illusions about the drug war or war. Even if you're a minarchist libertarian and you believe there should be taxation to some minimal degree, and you believe we have to have war every now and then, you don't fool yourself into thinking it's a property right. And it's like a necessary evil to you, and you want to get rid of it. But property rights we don't want to get rid of. We don't think they're evil. So one problem with calling it intellectual property is that I actually have a post on that same blog where I ran through different synonyms we could use, proposed by me and by other people. Like Nina Paley, the lady who did The Sita Sings the Blues, who's a big copyright abolitionist, she proposed intellectual pooperty, and I've called it intellectual poverty. But intellectual monopoly may be the best, actually descriptive term, which is not too pejorative, but it's actually descriptive.
Yeah, I tend to like that. And I actually credit Jim Fulner of Michigan, who's the one who, at least in my circles, I'm sure other people have come up with it, but he's the first person I knew personally that had come up with that. So I hope that helped you, Don. Itzoma has a question. I'm not sure I understand it. You might be able to understand it. We could always ask for a clarification. But he says, if a genie granted you a wish to remove IP protection for only one good, which good would you do it for?
Probably pharmaceuticals.
Oh, that's a good one.
Because and by the way, my book on this was called Against Intellectual Property, but another book is by Boldred and Levine, who are two economists who have a utilitarian or empirical argument against it, and their book is titled Against Intellectual Monopoly. That's their book.
Okay.
So they do use that term. The main argument given for patents is pharmaceuticals, because people say, well, even if you got rid of it for A, B, and C, you have to have the strongest case for patents is pharmaceuticals. And I actually think the weakest argument is pharmaceuticals, because pharmaceuticals are so important for saving lives, and anything that impedes innovation in that space is bad. And I do believe patents impede and distort innovation. So I think I'd get rid of it for pharmaceuticals.
All right. And it's funny because the next question kind of has to do with pharmaceuticals. So this is Dave's question. Dave said, but if I invented a medicine that cured cancer, shouldn't I benefit from that invention? Or should Karen be able to take that technology without having spent any money on the development of the cure? There's so many imported assumptions in there.
Well, yeah, like the word take. So you notice, so in private life and in the common law and in libertarian theory, we oppose theft. which means taking someone's thing. Now, why do we oppose that? Because when you take someone's thing, they don't have it anymore. I mean, why do I object to someone taking my Rolex or my bicycle or my arm, whatever? Because I don't have it anymore and I want to use it. But if someone could just look at it and make a copy on their own property, I wouldn't even notice it. Maybe it wouldn't be a taking. So when you copy what someone does, I think we should not call it taking, because that's technically question begging, because you can only take a resource that's owned. And if the debate is whether ideas basically should be owned, then if you call it taking, you're putting the cart before the horse. So it's not taking. And libertarianism is not about you deserving a profit on your actions at all. I mean, there's no guarantee. It's not like God's up there watching and he says, oh, this guy put a lot of effort into this, even though his business venture failed, I'm going to pay him a minimum wage or something to compensate him for the effort. I mean, that's actually Karl Marx and the labor theory of value, right? That the work you put into something determines its value. I mean, of course, what determines the value of a product is what the consumers are willing to pay for it. So what was the example again? Remind me, Karen.
A medicine that cured cancer.
Well, I mean, if you spend time researching that and you come up with a cure, you must be doing it for some reason. If you're doing it for a monetary profit, then you have to. It's your job as the businessman to figure out, how can I make a profit engaging in this action, coming up with something useful that people want in the face of a certain type of competition. And that's what everyone on the free market faces. Every time you come up with a new business venture, you have to think, how am I going to deal with competition? And there will be competition if I'm successful, because competition comes when people are successful and they're attracted to the possibility of making profit, right? So it's up to the inventor or the entrepreneur to figure out what business model they can come up with to make profit. Now, I think that if you come up with a new drug that cures cancer, you manufacture it and you don't reveal all the details so that people can't copy you easily, and you sell it and you get a reputation and you have a first mover advantage for several years. And by the time someone perfects a duplicate or a copycat product, you're the leader already, and you can probably still charge an extra amount because you have the reputation. But over time, your profits will erode because of you face competition. But that's how any business is. I mean, if you think now, a lot of people go to the store and they buy Tylenol instead of buying the acetaminophen generic brand, which is half as much. Why do they do that? I mean, they're both the same chemical, so people will pay more for reasons like reputation, brand, packaging, attractiveness, goodwill for the company that was the first one to come up with it. So, there are lots of ways to profit, but you have to use your ingenuity as an entrepreneur. And people don't do that now as much because they don't have to, because the government protects them from competition. So they don't bother to think how they would come up with creative ways to make. I mean, when piracy and streaming of music became a thing, musicians stopped making tons of money by selling CDs and LPs. So they started shifting to other models. They sell merchandise, they tour, they can get paid to record specialty songs. So there's lots of ways you have to think of to make money when you adapt to changing times and changing types of competition.
Yeah, and I think it's always really important to point out, though, that it's not on purpose, but there's a lot of assuming one's conclusions in a lot of these questions. And people need to get back to, I think sometimes as libertarians, particularly in America, we're so used to the idea of property that we don't examine actually why property is property and why there's such a focus on that. If everyone could simultaneously, say, farm the same piece of land, this issue would have never even have come up. There's no problem with that. But people attach this weird significance to it and not realize that the whole reason we even have something called property rights, it's because it's a rivalrous resource. And I don't think people really take it back to that. And on the other hand, people who come from cultures or countries where there isn't property rights, I think sometimes have a better understanding of it when they finally get them because they don't take it for granted. But so Sarah had a question here. She said, if I were to make a portrait of my mom, if IP laws were removed completely, then what is preventing a porn shop from putting my mom's image on their items? And she continued on a second comment that said, I want the freedom to decide who uses my property.
Well, you know, lots of people want things. I might not want a girl that has a new haircut and she's the envy of the school might not want other girls to copy the haircut either. But so what? You don't get everything you want. I think the answer is nothing. Nothing would stop a porn company from putting your mom's picture on it. And in the future, we're going to have deep fakes and people can do whatever they want. They can put their favorite movie star into a porn video if they want. And I don't think it's anything wrong with it. I don't think it violates anyone's rights whatsoever. You know, when I first started out, I thought, okay, legally you can't defend copyright, but it's a moral thing. Like it's wrong to copy. But now my mind is opened even further. I think you have to have an attitude that copying is a good thing. I mean, Nina Paley says copying is an act of love. Now, in case of porn, it's really an act of love, I guess. But no, I mean, that's like saying I don't want people lying about me. Well, so that means you're in favor of defamation law, which libertarians have routinely rejected for 60 years. I mean, Rothbard has a classic argument against that. Defamation law can't be justified either, even though you don't like the fact that people can do that. Blackmail also can't be outlawed under libertarian law, even though people that blackmail are seedy and despicable people sometimes. So it's just not the province of law to fix everything that you don't like or to give you everything that you want.
That is a good point. And what I would also say to Sarah is nothing is stopping a porn shop from taking a picture of your mom on the street in public square and putting her on porn merchandise if they found your mom attractive for that sort of thing. That, you know, you don't own your image in that way. I know some people will try to claim they do, particularly celebrities, but you don't. Once you start going down that road, then okay, you're starting to agree with the statists who say you can't film cops. You know, or
that's not actually the ironic thing. I don't know if you've seen this, but some cops are playing music when they start being filmed by citizens. So because they know that if they play music in the background, that the YouTube filters will block the video. So I think they played some patriotic song. It was ironic, or country western song or something. But there is actually kind of a quasi IP right in your image, and that's like a right of publicity. So that would actually fall under the IP rubric too. And this actually blocks a lot of documentaries and when you see news reports or things, you'll see people's faces blurred out. But that's not always feasible, or it ruins the kind of what you're trying to depict. Or if you take a movie or a photograph of a building and there's a sculpture in front of it, and even the building, the architectural designs are covered by copyright. So, and there's even some cases where someone gets takes a photograph of a seat of nature, like the Grand Canyon or a bridge, and they get a copyright in that photograph because copyrights apply to photographs. And then someone else, like 10 years later, goes to the same location and takes a photograph of the exact same vista. And they're sued for copyright infringement for their own photograph because it's too similar to the photograph someone else took.
That actually, I don't think it ever went into a lawsuit, but there was a dispute, I know, of a picture of a lighthouse with a wave up against it. It turned out there were two people there at the same time, and the pictures were almost identical. And one person was saying the other person took their photo. But no, that isn't.
The way copyright works is it covers a literal copy of something. So if you copy an image, that's infringement. Or if you make a derivative work. But it's supposed to exempt independent original creation. So if two people happen to write the same poem, which is rare and unlikely, but if they did, they each would have an independent copyright in it, and they would each have the right to use it and sell it. So the photograph is more like that. So two people are taking their own independent photographs, which is just a factual record of what happened, because this is all a physical process, right? The light reflects off the object and goes into the lens and makes a photograph. So it's not a copy, but yet copyright is not natural law. It's arbitrary, artificial law, and so it's not objective, and the boundaries are necessarily inherently vague and fuzzy, not to mention unjust. So the results are inherently unpredictable, and it's not the fault of courts or judges for these ridiculous results. They have to interpret these words. That's their job. I mean, judges are no longer judges in this country, at least federal judges, because their job is not to do justice anymore. Their job is to interpret words written down by a committee. That's it. And whether the results of that interpretation are just or unjust, their job is to just interpret the words and apply them. So how libertarians favor statute, law, or legislation is beyond me, because there's no reason to think the utterances of a committee would have anything to do with property rights or justice or fairness or libertarian, law at all.
Like, I'll tell you something crazy. We had an LNC meeting in a hotel, and apparently during our break, you could hear the terrible staticky music that was coming through the speakers, and our LNC meeting got copyright claimed that we broadcast on YouTube. And there's no argument in the world that that was a substitute for the original song. It was like horrible. You could barely hear it, but the algorithm picked it up. It's absolutely crazy.
And that's not YouTube's fault. So what happens is, if you infringe copyright, you're liable under the law. And in the past, you had official publishers, like your record label would publish your songs, your publisher would publish your books, newspapers would publish letters to the editor or columns. So they had this editorial control and discretion, so they could be held liable for your acts of infringement under vicarious liability. And the concern was, when the internet came around, platforms like an internet service provider who would host a website or a domain or a blogging site, or a site that had blogging, let people blog on it, like Blogspot, or that allowed comments from users to make comments, and later on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and all this. The concern was that these companies' business models couldn't work because they would be subject to immense liability for infringing acts of their users, right? Because they can't control what they're posting. So unless they hire thousands of staff to monitor this, which they don't have the money to do, they would just have to shut down or not even open up in the first place. So under Bill Clinton, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act was passed. And the one good thing that it did lots of bad things, but one good thing that it did was it gave the safe harbor, and it said ISPs and platforms are not liable for the copyright infringement acts of their users so long as they immediately take down anything that they get a notice for. Mm-hmm. So YouTube has to take things down at the slightest hint of a problem, because if they don't do that, they lose their immunity and their business model would collapse. And the same thing is true for the Communications Decency Act, which was enacted in the 90s, which did something similar for defamatory comments. The Communications Decency Act, Section 230, which you hear a lot of conservatives and even Biden, they're all against Section 230 because now Facebook and these guys are exerting editorial control. And so the idea is, well, they shouldn't be immune from liability. But they shouldn't be liable for defamation anyway, because defamation shouldn't be a law. And the same thing is true with copyright. So the DMCA safe harbor and the CDA safe harbor are good things, and we shouldn't take it away from people, even if we don't like these companies.
Well, and here's something that I had thought of, and then I'll get to some more questions here, but I want libertarians to think of this. If the argument is that intellectual property is actual property, just like your house or your money or whatever it might be, then why does it expire? If intellectual property is actual property, you should be able to pass it on to somebody who could pass it on to somebody who could pass it on to somebody, and there not be any the life of the artist plus whatever amount of time. It's either property or it's not. The very fact that we treat it differently and it has an expiration date, what, did it suddenly cease to become property on that magical date? That right there should tell you, even you, the not you, Stefan, but you, the interlocutor, don't believe it's real property in that way, or you wouldn't be in favor. You would think it should be able to be perpetual, to be passed down from one person to another as an inheritance or something of that sort. And if IP is in fact property, there wouldn't be a thing we could do today that wouldn't have been covered by someone who was the first person to do it. Who invented English? Who invented some of these words we use? Should that person be able to stop other people from using those words? Why is that word? Yeah, I mean, it gets crazy when you really think about it.
Using fire to cook, using animal skins to clothe ourselves, building a log cabin instead of living in a cave. Using the wheel. How about using the wheel? As for transportation. And the thing is, there are some libertarians who take it to an extreme, and they're consistent, like Golumbos and even some Randians and Lysander Spooner, Spooner was good on some things, but he was totally insane on IP. But most libertarians will say, so now here's when they start sounding like Democrats who want a minimum wage raised to $15, and you say, well, the libertarian argument is, well, why don't we make it $100? And then what's the Democrats say? They say, oh, well, that's not reasonable. That's too much. But a little bit of pain is good, but too much pain is bad. So the libertarian senses that if we had complete, consistent enforcement of IP as a real property right, they sense that it would kill all human life. We couldn't do anything. We literally could, because you would have to live by everything you do would be by permission of some long lost person or the heir of someone, and it would strangle all human life. And they sense that, so they cut it off at 70 years or 17 years, so that the pain is not too obvious and horrible. But why? Yeah, it's not as bad as if it was infinite, but it shouldn't be 20 or 70 years either. That's still bad.
Yep. Okay. All right, so Ryan Brown, I'm going to put this up here, and he also continued it in another comment, so I'll read the entire thing. It says, I understand that state enforcement of the IP protection laws and how they could be unenforceable. I still can't philosophically understand how a book that I write is not my property, for example. That book could be a scarce resource with real value.
Yeah, it's not a rivalrous resource. That's the thing. So the book, well, the word's ambiguous. The book, meaning a physical item that has ink on the pages arranged in a certain pattern, is owned by someone. That's true. But the book as an ideal object or as a pattern of information is not ownable, because information is never a thing in itself. It never exists in the world by itself. Information is always just the rearranging of an underlying substrate or medium. It's not even conceivable to have information that is not on some substrate. It's either embedded in a CD or on a magnetic arrangement of fibers in the tape, or not fibers, but the particles on a tape, or ink on a piece of paper, or something like that. And someone owns that underlying thing. So if you own the thing, you own the thing with all of its features and characteristics, but you don't own those features and characteristics separately. They're just descriptions of the thing. So if you own a car that's a red car, a Mustang, the 1964 red Mustang Ford, you own a car, but it has features like it has an age, it has a weight, it has a size, it has a color, it has a brand. You don't own redness. You don't own the age of that car. If you own redness, then you would own every red car. You would own every red balloon in the world. So if you extend ownership to the features of things that are owned, it effectively gives you ownership of everyone else's property that they already own. So the fundamental mistake here is the libertarian mistake and the common mistake in private law, that creation is a source of rights. This is the fundamental mistake. Mm-hmm. And the reason we make that mistake is because in the tangible world, it usually is a source of rights. Although not really even then, not always, because what creation really means is you take a factor, a thing in the world, and you manipulate it, you rearrange it into a different, more useful configuration or shape, And when you do that, you create wealth because you make yourself more wealthy, or because you can sell it for more money, or you can use it for better purposes. But you don't get new rights when you do that. So like if you take a piece of metal and you make it into a shovel, or if you take a piece of wood and some string and you make it into a fishing net, fishing net to catch fish, you haven't acquired any new property rights. You've just changed the things that you own into some other shape. And by the same token, if you do that with someone else's property, you don't own that either. So if you work on the assembly line for Ford and you're rearranging materials owned by Ford into a car, which is now more valuable, you've helped create wealth, which is how you get paid a salary, because the profit made by the employer in selling the objects that you helped to create or to transform makes a profit that he can use to pay his workers. So everyone shares in that profit in that way. But of course, Karl Marx, who believes in labor theory of value, who thinks you own your labor and therefore you own what you mix it with, thinks that these employees are getting exploited and stolen from because the employer is making a profit. So you see how basically the whole IP idea morphs into to communism, basically. Now, so if you write a book, you're putting patterns on a piece of paper, which is information. And if you keep it to yourself, you own the book. But if you decide to reveal it publicly, then other people learn of what's in the book, and you don't own their brains and what they've learned from that book. And in the future, by the way, this is going to be the case. You're not going to need to use a camera or a photocopy machine. Mm-hmm. We're going to be able to look at things with our eyeballs and have an augmented brain that instantly stores in memory inside your head everything that you see and learn. So you will have a copy of that book in your brain. We already have a rough copy now if you have a decent memory, but we'll have an exact copy in our brains. So imagine if you take IP seriously, then if someone just sees something you've done, they've seen you invent a new mousetrap or a new iPhone with a rounded corner and a touch screen, or they see a painting that you painted, or they hear a song that you sing or that you perform. If you have the right to prevent them from learning that and having a copy, you can tell them to erase it from their own brains, which means they're your slave. So basically, copyright means slavery. That's why you can't own a book, because, call me old-fashioned, but I'm part of the libertarian generation that opposes slavery.
You can't help what, right. It's, people need to get through their heads that intangible things aren't something you can own. It just isn't. And the fact that it has value still doesn't make it something you can own. Excuse me. If I open a store and come up with a great way to, to advertise, that's a value, and other people can mimic that. And it becomes a new standard. Just because something I think of is of value doesn't mean that I own it at all.
That's another mistake. Libertarians make, is they say that if something has value, that it's subject to property rights, or it's property. That's just not true. First of all, you got to stop making the mistake that, like, some of the opponents of Bitcoin, like Peter Schiff, do. They say, oh, gold can be money because it has intrinsic value. Well, Austrians know that nothing has intrinsic value. And even Ayn Rand, she argued that you own ideas because the source of property rights in her theory is the creation of what she called values, because the purpose of life is to pursue your own values or whatever. So we have to use our intellect and our effort and our resources to create values. And if you create a value, you own it. That's sort of their argument. But that's a metaphor taken too far. We should not think of values as independently existing things, but value should be a verb, not a noun. So I value something, and I demonstrate that I value it by trying to achieve it, right? Which was actually Rand's definition of value, something you act to gain and keep. And in Austrian economics, it's called demonstrated preference. You demonstrate that you prefer or value something by trying to achieve it. Like the end or the goal of your action is what you value. But they don't have a value in them. It's a relationship between you and the thing you're trying to pursue. So just because something has a value, that's just a way of saying I value it. If I value some state of affairs in the world, some end result of my action, it doesn't mean that end result is an ownable object. I mean, most actions the goal of most actions is not the acquisition of an ownable object. Some is, if I want to buy a car, then the object of my action is to attain a car that I own. But most of the time, my action is to satisfy my hunger, to see a little girl smile, to help achieve liberty in the world, to enjoy myself listening to music, to smoke a pipe. I mean, these are just the ends of action, and they're not ownable things. And, you know, love and emotion and happiness, you know, you can say I value my family. Love is a good thing. It has value. Just because something has value doesn't mean it's a property right. And even things that you can sell doesn't mean it's an ownable thing, because that's a metaphor. Like if I sell you my labor or I sell you my ideas, it doesn't mean that I own those things. That's just a way of describing the transaction that happened. Like if you sell me to teach you something, how to make something, I'm selling you information. That still doesn't mean that I own the information. All that means is you paid me money to induce me to perform an action that satisfies you. So the end of your action of paying me money is to get me to perform an action. Now I can perform that action or not perform it because I have the ownership of my body, and I can choose not to do what you want, or I can choose to do what you want. So you know that. So you say, I will pay you this gold coin if you will perform this action of teaching me how to do A, B, and C. Okay, so we call that a sale because it looks like a regular exchange of two owned objects, but in this case, it's just one owned object that's exchanged. That's the money being paid to me, and he paid me that because I did what he wanted me to do, which was to teach him information.
Yep. And it's something else that just really occurred to me, where you had pointed out that it is possible for two people to come up with the same poem. Not likely, but when you get into shorter bits of text, or even band names or anything like that, which is, you know, considered creative works, libertarians do not believe that ultimate rights conflict. But if you can have two people that own the exact same thing, who has the ultimate right to it?
And not only that, like, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. But I'm saying, like, and somebody who allegedly infringed on this right, do they now have to pay double damages because both of them have the right to the full extent of damages? Now, how is that fair to that person? And if you don't think that, then you're admitting that they really don't both own something. The whole fact is that justice and libertarianism have to do with settling disputes, where two people might have a claim to something, to say who actually has the claim. The reason you own yourself is because nobody has a better claim to your body than you do. If someone could have the exact same claim to my body, it wouldn't be me owning it. So, and I know that word is more metaphorical and people argue about that, but I think we all understand.
I would say is accurate. We do own our bodies because our body is a scarce resource, and someone has to have the right to decide who gets to use it. And in libertarianism, that's the person himself. In all other systems, there's a form of partial or complete slavery. So, and in fact, so when the government maintains or assumes the right to put you in jail, if you don't do what they want, like if you don't fight in their wars, or if you don't pay their taxes, or if you don't obey their drug laws, then the government is assuming ownership of your body because they're grabbing it and physically putting it in prison as a master would to a slave. So these laws do but the libertarian says, no, those laws are unjust because we own our bodies. You don't have the right. That's what the non-aggression principle means. Non-aggression means you can't use someone's body without their permission, because they are the one who gets to decide what happens to their body. They can consent. They're the owner. That's exactly what it means. And, you know, for normal rights violations of normal property rights, the whole reason we oppose it is because of this conflict. But in principle, you always could know when someone's violating your rights. So if someone punches me in the arm, I feel it. I see it. I can detect it. I can take a picture of it happening, and I object to it, or I'm offended, or I don't like it. But the IP idea is that, like, I could have my property, be living in my compound in the middle of Arizona, and I come up with these inventions, and someone spies me doing something, and in like Alaska, someone builds a similar machine and they're using it for 15 years without me even knowing. Yet they're violating my rights even though I don't even know they are. So it's just absurd. And when you point out absurdities resulting from IP law like that, or other metaphysical absurdities, or just the absurd injustice of it, like the fact that copyright lasts for the life of the author plus 70 years, okay, then what usually happens is the advocate of IP backs off and they say, well, I'm not in favor of that. So every single thing I point out that's obviously unjust about IP law, the proponent says, well, I'm not in favor of that. And I say, well, what about this? I'm not in favor of that. And I say, well, what the hell are you in favor of? And they say, I'm not an expert. I don't know. So it's like, well, what are you defending? I mean,
yeah. Now, I know this is kind of going off the track of IP a bit, but I do want to put Sarah's question up here, and she's going back to her issue of the porn shop putting the portrait of her mother on some pornography. She says, you tell me what I can do to a company who sells porn with this, if I can or can't take this son of a bitch to jail.
So can we not put her on? I guess she can't join us in the call easily.
I don't know. Sarah, are you potentially at a computer with headphones and video? I'll wait to see if you answer in chat.
Okay.
I'll have to scroll down. Let me see here. So I'll give that a few minutes. In the meanwhile, I will...
I just wonder if we could have people... Yeah. But anyway, well, let me ask you, what do you think the answer to that is, Karen?
You can't take somebody to jail for that. I mean, it's
right.
unfortunate. People are going to be jerks. Right? Yeah. I mean, not everything that gets me mad or Sarah mad or other people mad, not everything that's scummy, not everybody being a jerk means you can take them to jail. That just...
Yeah, you have
I'm
to
sorry,
remember,
life isn't all puppies and baskets sometimes.
Well, and that's not the point of libertarianism is about what the law should be, and law is always the use of force. And so our view is that force is only justified when it's used against force. So that's what aggression means. That's what the non-aggression principle means, is that any action you commit is justified as long as it's not an initiation of force against the person or property of another. So if someone does something that's not aggression, it has to be legally permissible. So the question would be, if you use a photograph of someone on your porn video, how does that commit aggression against them? And if it doesn't, then they have to be permitted to do it. I mean, this is just plumb line, black letter law libertarianism. It's elementary. So you'd have to come up with an argument about why putting someone's photograph in a porn video is a violation of their rights. How does it trespass against their property? How does it commit aggression against them? What force is involved there?
And I am, just in case she can, I am shooting on Facebook Messenger to Sarah a link, and if she can join, she can. My connection down here sometimes isn't so good, and Messenger for some reason is super slow, so I'm going to need to let that load up. But once I can do that, I'll do that, Sarah. So continuing here, I'm going way back up. We've got a ton of questions. Let me find where. Oh, right here. This is a good one. Dave Davis says, what about reputation? If I put Jennifer Aniston's image in a porn flick, am I not ruining her reputation? I mean, she could probably sue me if she was fired from her job as a result of the image.
So I would recommend everyone read the chapter in The Ethics of Liberty by Rothbard called Knowledge, True and False, which takes apart the argument for defamation law, which is the law that protects reputation rights. The argument is that Jennifer Aniston's rights are not violated because you don't own your reputation. Your reputation is another intangible thing that is not a property right. Reputation is just what it means to repute, what you're known as, like what other people think about you. So you can't own what other people think about you because you don't own their brains, right? And if someone forms an idea about you that is incorrect, that also doesn't violate your rights. People have the right to be wrong. They have the right to think wrong things about you. And if they believe something false about you because someone else said it, that is, they defamed you, they lie about you, third parties who hear that are entitled to rely upon unreliable people if they want to. So again, there is no rights violation whatsoever. And in fact, I believe that in a world without defamation law, defamation would occur less often and have less power. Right now, if you defame someone, and if that person doesn't sue the person who defamed them, everyone assumes, well, it must be true, because otherwise you would sue. But if you live in a world where there's no such a thing as the defamation right, then the lack of filing a lawsuit wouldn't be evidence of anything, because there's no such thing as a lawsuit. So people would hear people saying things that sound crazy, and they would be more skeptical. They wouldn't trust it, because they would think, well, maybe the guy's lying, because after all, we live in a world of freedom where people are free to lie, so maybe this guy's lying. So right now, the defamation law's existence gives sort of a false veneer of credibility to people that are lying. So defamation law has the opposite of its intended effect even now, the defamation law.
Right, because they're like, if this was allowed to stay in print, it must be true.
Yes.
There's a question that somebody asked that's not about IP. Please feel free to say you don't want to say, because it's not about IP, but I'll indulge him and ask it, though he picked the one topic that's maybe more controversial than IP. Tommy said, my question's not about IP. I hope that's okay. I wanted to ask what Mr. Kinsella's view is on abortion. The next bomb, right? And you can decline if you wish, because that's not what you were here for, but okay.
No, it's fine. At first, I was a Randian, and I was like, it's a ball of tissue and a ball of cells, and, you have the right to do it. Now, of course, when you have a kid, a lot of people's views soften a little bit, as mine did. And it sounds patronizing to say it, but you do learn things from your experiences in life. Although that's not what made me modify my position. My view is this. I think that our rights are attributed to each other because we're fellow humans and we share certain characteristics. And one of those is rationality. And so that's why we humans have rights. And I do believe that it's a continuum or a spectrum issue. So I don't think that you could say a one-day-old fertilized zygote has rights. I do think that a baby has rights, and I think that the difference between a baby and a 9-month-old fetus in the womb is not that different. So I think that a civilized, humane society would probably think that late-term babies are close to having rights, and therefore abortion at the later stages is tantamount to infanticide. However, I don't think it should be illegal in any case, because it's such an intrusive thing to police and monitor and detect that. You'd have to intrude into the family, into the woman's privacy. And let's face it, especially in the future, if a woman's pregnant, she wants to have an abortion, she's going to be able to do it with a robot in her basement, So I think it should be legal, but I do think I think it's increasingly immoral during pregnancy. And I think because we're libertarians, we do value fellow humans and human life. And I think in a future society where people have gotten over their religious hangups, where sex is seen as bad, and technology's there, and there's going to be a shortage of humans, there's going to be almost no reason for a woman to abort if she accidentally is pregnant. Plus, that'll happen less often anyway, because technology will be able to prevent accidental, pregnancy. So that's my view. So my view is it should be legal, because the way I view it is the jurisdiction over the issue until the moment of birth should be placed with the family. So inside that family, I think it should be viewed as wrong to do it unless it's for the life and health of the mother at the later terms. But I don't think it should ever be illegalized, especially not by the state. The state should never illegalize it.
Okay, Tommy, so I hope that answered. I do have Sarah in the green room. Let's see if I can add. This will be fun. So let me go to the next scene here and let me see if I can add her here. So here, now let me add you back. Add to the right. Okay, now I need to, there we go. Now let me try Sarah and this. Almost, back. Yeah, you need to, I lost Stefan here a little bit though.
I can hear you.
Oh, good.
Well, let me, I'm trying
Hello,
still
Miss
to
Sarah.
figure this out.
Pleased to meet you.
Add right, add left. Okay, that's Stefan. Solo. Okay, I figured that out, but it's the other one I'm not assigned to. Let me try this. And let me try one other thing here. Add. Yeah.
Let's just put her up for now. If you can hear me, let's just let her stay up for a while.
Okay. Let me.
Okay. I'm down for whatever.
Then let me get
I'm
this.
here. I'm just. See, I'm here.
Yeah.
Yay!
I'll move over a little. I'll be narrow.
Well,
This is
I
teaching me
can.
about streaming too,
Here we
so
go.
Hey!
I can make myself little, and now we're all up on the screen.
Now,
Okay.
see, you learn something, Karen, and if anyone else learns from this, then they have to pay you royalties.
I know, they gotta pay me.
You
Hey,
own that technique you just came up with.
Now remember, ideas cannot be placed under copyright.
All right.
So, okay, so
All right. Where do we want to go from here? Because
Well,
we went through a lot.
yeah, well, wherever you thought we were still in the conversation, because you had a lot of comments
Okay.
that.
Yes, okay, because here is my problem. How do you make this bastard proof?
You can't.
How do you make them
Yeah.
what?
How do you keep people from being bastards?
People from taking it to I know you can't completely stop it. However, what is making you think that this isn't going to get worse?
Well, what's
With
so
people-
bad about it? What's so bad about it, really?
Okay. If anyone is allowed to use anything, that's what you're promoting?
No, not scarce resources that are owned, not tangible objects. You can't use someone's
tangible.
property.
Okay. Is photography, art, and whatnot tangible to you?
Well, a physical painting is owned by someone, but the pattern on the paper is not owned. No.
Explain this one. Because if I use my acrylic to put a pattern on a page with my own two hands, with my own colors, with my own mother posing for it, what point does it not become property?
Well, the painting is your property because you own the paint and you own the canvas. Although if you're doing it for your mother and using her canvas and her paints, or she's paying you to do it, then she would own it. So the question of who owns it is just a question of who owns the material resources that you're manipulating, right? I mean, what you want to do is you want to go beyond the ownership of the painting, and you want to say you can stop other people from making a similar painting in their own house with their canvas. Now, they own their canvas, correct?
I am not saying this. I am saying that I want to make sure that this image on this painting does not go to people that I don't want to reproduce the image for. I want the freedom to decide that I don't want people to use this for commercial stuff. I want the freedom to say, I don't want this to be put on certain sites because that's just the way I want it. Now, because here's
Well,
the thing. You also have the freedom of choice versus the freedom of letting everybody else to use it. What is protecting my freedom of choice to decide who gets to use that painting? Because if you have an image, for instance, say, of my young nephew who's 12 years old, what happens if everything is free and anyone can use it? And what's stopping the pornography industry from getting into pedophilia stuff?
Nothing. This is not. So the purpose of libertarianism is not to make the world not do things that you don't like. I mean, the obvious way to prevent that from happening is not to publicize your painting.
Sexual exploitation of innocent things is a part of your so-called freedom.
I mean, let me ask you a question. Are you a libertarian?
I was a libertarian at one point, and then I got angry at you, especially with subjects like this.
Well, it can happen, and there's listen, there's nothing wrong with that. If there's things that you just find unconscionable.
There's nothing wrong with the potential raising.
No,
that
Sarah, let's not get overly emotional. I get it because I once.
Emotional.
No, listen, I'm not, believe me, I'm not talking down to you because Mark Montoni can tell you when I lost it over similar subjects. What I said was okay is...
Calm down. I am
right.
Calm.
Sarah, what I was saying was okay is that it's okay you disagree with libertarianism. That's what I was saying was okay. That there's no judgment. Yeah, no, I wasn't saying anything else was okay. I was just saying... It's fine to have this conversation, even though you're not maybe a libertarian anymore. That's all I meant.
I'm asking because I'm trying to find what common principles we have so I can appeal to those. So I want to, if you're a libertarian.
All right. Let's keep on the subject because the main subject that we're talking about is IP. Yes or no?
Well, it was, but your question is actually not about IP exactly.
Yes, it is at this point, because I am talking about what copyright actually protects at this point, and I'm asking you what copyright protects at this point. Because you're saying it's not protecting anything anyway, but what's preventing things from getting worse if you take it away? That's what I'm asking.
Well, some things would get better if we got rid of copyright, and some things might even get worse. Certainly things would change. But the purpose of law is not to make things better. I mean, purpose of law is to protect our rights and to define what's just. What's a just use of force?
I want the right to be able to decide what I want my work to do, especially when it comes to the distribution to other people as well as free trade.
Let me just jump in 1 second. Sarah, progressives want the right to health care. Wanting a right doesn't bring it into existence. Something either is a right or isn't a right, regardless of our wants. And I'm sorry, Stefan.
The topic is not health care.
But I'm giving it an analogy. It's the same thing. You want a right to do something.
Let me tell you why. Because as a libertarian, you don't believe in health care anyway. Because
what do you mean I don't believe in health care?
You need the two main things that the libertarians are supposed to protect. Tell me yes or no. Fraud and violence. Yes or no?
Well, broadly, I'm always the queen of specification. Generally speaking, yes. Fraud and violence. Aggression. Because violence, you can have defensive violence. That's why I'm saying why I think you need to be very, very specific.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're getting at, so that's why.
Let me try something with Sarah. Sarah, do you believe in freedom of the press in general?
Yes.
Okay, so if I own a factory, a printing press, I'm able to print books that I want to print, and you shouldn't be able to stop me from printing a book in general. Would you agree with that?
Exactly.
And so the reason for that is because I own my property, and when I print words on paper or when I say things in public, those are words, and I'm not violating anyone's rights. And therefore, the law should not censor speech and censor books, right?
Correct. However, the topic is not words. In particular, it's the actual book, because you're also saying that books and information are not under that problem.
So let's say in some countries, if you paint a picture of Muhammad, people will kill you for doing that. Do you think
Exactly.
that is just? Do you think that's
That is
just when they
unjust.
kill you? So do you think people have a right to paint the Prophet Muhammad on a painting if they want to in their own house?
They also have the right to say, oh, this is in my house. I am having a picture of it, but I don't want you to sell my picture of Muhammad.
Hold on. Just go with me for a second. So do you think people have the right? Do people have the right to make images on paper and sell it to other people who want to buy it if they want to do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, and if you had the right to stop them, that would mean you're assuming the property right in the property that they own. And they own it, so you'd be taking their property. Or the government would be taking it. If the government gave you the right to stop me from printing a book, that would be a taking of my property rights. Wouldn't you agree?
Okay, so if you're saying that if the government is trying to enforce it because you're claiming that it's your property the moment that it comes out of my hands.
If the government passed a law that said you can't publish a book if 10 of your neighbors object, would that be a just law?
That's stupid.
It's not stupid. I'm trying to get you
No,
to see a
I
principle.
mean, no, that is a ridiculous law. I agree with you. I apologize. My wording was incorrect.
But the reason it's stupid is because it's restricting my property rights to do what I want.
But if you parts of the IP, I completely agree with. What you just mentioned, yes, that's baloney. But if I don't want those same 10 people to, hey, this is a nice book, I'm going to take it off of the shelf, put my name on it, and make money for myself.
Well, you're a libertarian, kind of, so you're not against people making money, are you? What's wrong with commercial purposes and people making money?
Because it's my work. I put my work and my name on it. And I don't want them to do that. This is my choice for my work. You're talking about abortion, yes or no?
Let's imagine you're learning how to paint, so you're practicing painting, or you're practicing to be a sculptor, and you're at a workshop, and the teacher says, okay, I've got a picture on my monitor of the Mona Lisa, famous painting. As an exercise, let's all try to paint the Mona Lisa. Would that be some kind of criminal act in your mind?
No, but if the teacher goes and says, wow, this is an awesome painting of the Mona Lisa. Let's put it, it's like, I don't want that, let's say that's my work, and like, oh, teacher, but I don't want you to put that on the internet because that's a painting I made and it's very special to me.
But that's different, because you can have a contract with the teacher. I'm talking to the other. You're missing the other point I'm getting at. So, if I'm like her star pupil and she says, "Well, everyone else did a pretty good job, but yours is like uncanny. It's so good. You're going to be a star painter someday." And so, let's say I become a famous painter, and then someone wants to buy my very first painting of Mona Lisa, and I sell that painting of Mona Lisa. It's Stephan Kinsella's Mona Lisa. Would that be violating anyone's rights? Would it be fraud? Would it be hurting anyone?
I would like to ask whose remaining family of the original painting was.
So I'm asking you a question. So let's say we know who the family is. Do you think I'm violating their rights by selling a copy of the Mona Lisa?
If they say yes, I'm totally down with it.
No, if they say no.
If they say no, then I will respect their wishes.
That doesn't answer whether it violates their rights. Does it violate their rights?
You're asking what I would do.
No, I'm asking whether it violates their rights. Can you make it illegal? Can they sue me and get money from me?
Here's the thing. As a decent person, as someone in the moral right, that it would at least tries to strive to the moral right, doesn't always succeed. But anyway. But here's the thing.
Well, I don't think there's anything immoral about making a painting of the Mona Lisa whatsoever. I mean, what if the family says we don't want you to even use it as a model and practice on it? We don't want you to do that in the privacy of your own home.
Then they have to deal with the entire school system about that, but that's besides the point.
I know, but they could do that if you had your way with copyright.
But isn't that their freedom to choose, because that is their heirs to what that man's legacy was?
So Muslims have the freedom to choose not to have an outsider paint a copy of Muhammad. Why don't you respect their rights and not paint Muhammad?
That's why I don't.
No, you don't, because they might kill you if you do.
No, because that is their vision of their prophet. Therefore, if that is what they want me to do with their prophet, then I will respectfully not paint him.
But should it be
but
illegal?
It doesn't violate their rights. Right. That's the question.
Right.
Libertarianism is all about what the law should be, not about what you should do.
Here's the thing. We are protecting against violence, yes or no? See where I'm going with this?
No, I have no idea. That's why I'm puzzled.
Okay, we're using the subject of the Prophet Muhammad. The reason that they are not allowing us to paint this is because they're going to kill us, yes or no?
Well, some I wouldn't want to paint.
They're not allowing us to paint it is because they don't want us to.
That is not what you said.
I didn't say that. I wasn't even part of this discussion. Well, and I don't think we can hyper literalize people. There are people who get killed for painting the Prophet Muhammad.
Are we protecting against violence, yes or no?
Protecting against aggression?
Yes.
By protecting against aggression, you stop the people from aggressing. You don't say, "Oh, you provoked them." That's not.
The painting has nothing to do with this subject at this point, because the entire reason that you're not painting it is because of the act of violence.
No, but it is about the painting.
It's about the painting, but you're talking about the law behind it at this point. Now,
right. Well, I'm asking if it should be illegal.
There is not the same situation. Let me rephrase this. The Mona Lisa, their family asks, could you not use the Mona Lisa as your thing, because that is the legacy of our family. The situation that you used with the Prophet Muhammad is because, oh no, they're going to kill us. Two totally different situations.
Well, what if there was a deranged member of that artist who said, I'm going to get so mad at you if you use Mona Lisa that I might come kick your ass? I mean, you don't know what people are going to do. I'm not trying to get into like a religious argument. So,
you nearly did because you brought it up first. But
I didn't.
No, he did.
I'm trying to show that. I mean, you want to stop a pornographer from using a photograph in their movie. So I see no difference between that and the Islamists who want to kill people, because copyright is enforceable by federal prison.
That we are trying to protect as libertarians, yes or no? That is the core edict is fraud and violence.
You said you weren't a libertarian, so I don't really know where you're coming from.
The entire topic of this is IP and libertarianism, yes or no? I am talking.
The question is it justified? Are IP laws justified? That's the question.
Right. Are they
IP
exactly
as they are? No, but you really need to put some protections to make sure that our freedoms of choice are being protected.
You don't have a freedom of choice in this. That's the thing. You're arguing for a right you don't have.
You're not fighting for freedom.
You don't have absolute freedom to. You can only what you have are negative rights, but what you're asserting is a positive right. Libertarians do not hold to any positive rights unless you contracted for it.
Unless you contracted for it, okay.
I can voluntarily say I'm going to do something that I'm not by the realm of justice required to do, but I voluntarily take an obligation upon myself.
Or
But
in
that,
malfeasance, as long as it's within the actual rules.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Or in the side of malfeasance, if it's in the actual rules.
I don't know what
Meaning
rules.
You're not going to try and stop the jerks either.
You can't stop jerks. You can stop people who are violating rights. Now, you can use social pressures. We're talking about the law here. There's plenty of things you can do to stop jerks outside of the law, but I'm really sticking to the law at this point.
Okay. So let's. Do you mind if I shift a gear for one moment?
Well, before you do that, let me finish one thought on this. You have to
Okay.
think of it, libertarianism as like a symmetrical and a consistent doctrine. So if someone uses force, then you can respond with force. Okay? If someone tries to harm you with force, you can use force in self-defense. But you can't use force against someone if they don't use force, because if you use force against someone for a non-violent action, you're the one starting violence. And so you're the aggressor. So if someone does something that is not forceful, you have to use non-forceful ways of responding.
All right. So what you're telling me is, if somebody were to use the image of my mother against my will to put on their own objects, whether it's pornography or not, all I have to do is write revenge porn on them and spread it just as badly.
Correct. That's a good way of looking at it. Correct.
It didn't mean if morally you have to. It's just, listen, not everything that, listen, I find the idea of revenge porn and everything like that absolutely disgusting. I find the fact that people aren't forced, if they find somebody starving along the side of the road, that they aren't forced to go to a restaurant and buy them food, disgusting. But I can't have the law do that. I can say that person is an absolute shitheel, but I can't use the force of the law. People who take somebody's image and create a degrading depiction of it, I do think they're an absolute shitheel. But I don't have the right to use the force of law against them. The force of law is ultimately backed up by a gun, which means that anything you're going to use the force of law against, you better say, you'd be willing to kill somebody for that. And,
Right.
and it's not even just willing, that it would be justified. Because what I might be willing to do really has nothing to do with, necessarily what's just.
If for nothing
Sure,
else, that actually helped explain libertarianism a little bit better to me.
Did you see the TikTok deep fake videos of Tom Cruise that came out recently?
I did not.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do not know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't pay much to TikTok.
If you just Google it, you'll see some guy. There's deep fake technology is coming about, and it allows you to take pictures and images of say famous people or anyone.
Oh yeah, putting things
and
on the.
the computer can map it onto so I could be an actor, or I could do a video, and then they could map Tom Cruise's face onto me and his voice, and it looks just like him. And someone did that as an experiment, and it's uncanny how accurate it looks, and everyone's freaking out about it. And it's kind of delightful and scary, and it has lots of implications for society, because in the future, when you see a video introduced as evidence of something, it might not be evidence anymore, because you never know whether it was faked or not. But that's coming because of technology. But the question is, when this guy did an experiment and he released the Tom Cruise deep fake video, did it violate Tom Cruise's rights? Because there's a video of Tom Cruise out there in a 2-minute video doing things in front of a camera, but it's not really him. Did that violate his rights?
That's a good question. Because here's the thing, because according to what law says already, if you're in public and you do it and somebody tapes you, I mean, that's public domain. So I have to think about that one. Because
that's
if
not
it's
really the law, actually. There's a publicity right, which is a type of IP right, which limits that to some degree as well, unfortunately. because of
So how
IP
do you?
and all.
Okay. So how do you prevent this? Okay, wait. Okay. It's not that I'm a okay. Okay, I can't. Okay, because I declare myself a part of a religion, I can't say that I'm totally against pornography. But taking religion out of this and talking about the rights, I'm as a former libertarian, I'm totally okay with people being willing in the sex industry and doing what they need to do in order to make their money. It's when they're unwilling and stuff is made of them that I have.
You were you were a libertarian until I started mouthing off on Karen's page about IP. Now you're not a libertarian.
It was actually the stance against violence, because if you guys use the Boston Tea Party as a freaking example and even a party of their own, and you don't see violence is throwing the private property over the freaking table, but this is a different topic. That wasn't the topic.
Okay.
But let's continue on the IP train. Because, I mean,
Well, that's why I clarified aggression from violence, because libertarians aren't opposed to all violence.
Thank you. Originally, that's not what was said. That's why I kind of blew up.
Well, that's why I clarified. It's only
Right.
initiatory violence, which is aggression.
Now, here's the thing. Boston... Okay, we're not going to get into the Boston Tea Party. Because
Well, and I don't think you'll find friends of the Boston Tea Party necessarily here. I don't know who you were speaking of, but I'm... You know, there's
a lot of people I could be speaking of in the Libertarian Party, my friend, but that's besides the point.
Well, you know, I don't think that the founding fathers were gods or anything like that.
No, they weren't.
So,
I mean, we're never going to get it perfect. I mean...
But you see, I think where we've come to an understanding, though, it's really coming down to an issue of negative rights and positive rights. And it seems that's where the fundamental disagreement is.
Right. Because here's the thing. It's biblically proven that you can't even make the Bible bastard proof. I mean, why would we have people abusing those rights? But...
Can I ask you a question?
Go for it.
Okay, I understand that you're not a libertarian anymore, so you don't accept the premise that we only have negative rights. But would you concede, if given our premise, if you take our premise as true for the sake of argument, do you understand how then there's a solid libertarian case to be opposed to IP?
You do have a solid case. The problem is, how do you prevent it from taking away freedoms at the same time? Because
we don't see the things you're claiming are freedoms are positive rights, and we don't believe in positive rights. Now, I understand you do.
Why I have a problem with you guys.
No, I get it. No, I get it. So within your particular worldview, you're being consistent. But of course, the argument we were trying to make is under a strictly libertarian worldview, that IP is unjust. And I think we almost agree on that. You just don't agree with libertarianism. That's okay. But moving out, taking our premises as true for the sake of argument that there are no such thing as positive rights.
Okay. About 75% of what I agree with 75%.
Okay, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm trying to come to a point of understanding.
As a point of understanding, because here's the thing, within the Libertarian Party, we have so many different parties. We have anarchists, we have people that want the same thing, only with more freedoms. You're not going to hit the entire spectrum with any topic.
Well, not necessarily, because I'm going to have to qualify this a lot. The people who say that you can't define Libertarian Party libertarianism because libertarians have so many different views are incorrect. Because our bylaws, in fact, do set forth a definition. We don't require everyone to...
2 years.
What?
Which change every 2 years.
No, it doesn't. No, I'm speaking of this...
website. I will find it.
I'm speaking of the statement of principles that hasn't changed
Okay,
since
statement
19.
of principle. My bad. Let me double check that though, because I thought there was a thing there that said we changed the thing every 2 years.
That's the platform. The platform is different.
Platform. Okay, my bad.
Yeah, that's different. I'm talking about the statement of principles. That's what our bylaws say Libertarian Party libertarianism is. And it's unchangeable, and it hasn't changed since 1974 when there was one opportunity to change it. So if somebody disagrees with the statement of principles, that's fine. But Libertarian Party libertarianism can be defined.
All right, let's go over it and see where this actually fits in, because at the time, let's go look at those principles and look at, because I want to educate myself on what exactly the statement says to make this libertarian, because it makes no sense in my brain.
To make what?
Okay, where is the statement on the webpage?
It's under the platform. It's after the preamble. It starts with, "We, the members of the Libertarian Party, oppose the cult of the omnipotent state and uphold the rights of the individual."
Okay, give me a moment. Join the OP. I'm trying to find it on the website. Because I want to get this up so that people that are wondering why, because here's the thing. Here's the kicker that we're having a problem with. Why the heck is this libertarian? So let's see. Libertarian platform, learn more, preamble, statement of principles. Okay. Statement of principles. All right. Cell phone. Okay. What exactly parts of this statement of principles is this defending?
Are you talking about IP or positive rights? Because we were going
both ways on this. So
right, so I don't know.
IP was the main topic first. So
right.
I think what we're arguing, Sarah, is that the core abstract general libertarian principles, if you apply them, so we have to apply them and come up with some implications. And one of those implications is that IP laws would be unjust. And that's why Karen and I would like it to be in the platform, because it's a direct implication of the principles which have not changed.
But here's the thing: when you have many sides of the libertarian, like this is like you said, this is one of those topics that divides the entire party.
Right, and we have an opinion about how it should be properly interpreted, and that's what we're arguing for.
All right.
When I was referring to the statement of principles, I was going on the issue of positive rights.
Positive rights. Okay, let me look that up then. Positive rights.
No, it doesn't. That's a term of art. That phrase you're not going to find in there.
Oh, really?
Because it's a term of art. I could have named it a different term of art. It's a philosophical term.
Okay, so if it's a philosophical term and it's not in the subject that it's not in the platform that you actually mentioned, then what part of the platform does this positive rights go into?
Because the principles are negative rights. That's what they define.
Right. Everything in the statement of principles is a negative right.
Okay. For everybody else that's listening to this, what is a positive right and what is a negative right? So let's get the basics down before we argue.
Sure. But we are going a bit far afield, but that's okay because it is necessary. A negative right is a negative right is a right that you inherently have in yourself as a part of being human. It does not require anyone else to do anything to fulfill that right. The example I like to give is you have a right to life, but that right to life doesn't mean anyone has to keep you alive. The only duty people have to you is not to actively kill you. A positive right requires somebody to do something for you.
Okay, so a negative right is for the self. The positive right is for somebody else to do it for you.
Let me try.
Sure.
A negative right is all rights are claims on what other people can or cannot do. A negative right just says you cannot do this. You can't interfere with my property.
Oh,
a positive right. a positive right means you have to do something for me. So if I have a right to my life, that means you can't kill me. If I have a right to education, that means you have to provide me with your tax dollars so that I can buy a teacher. So I can take things from you. So positive rights means I have a positive rights is basically a form of slavery because it gives you a positive claim on what other people have to do for you. And that's what libertarians oppose. We're for negative rights and we're against positive rights unless they are voluntarily incurred by a contract.
Right.
So let me get this straight. If I'm saying no to someone else, for instance, saying okay, because this has to do with the topic that I brought up about pornography. If I tell somebody who is, let me see. If I'm at a beach and somebody takes a picture of me and I tell them, hey, I don't want any pictures taken of me, I'm saying no, but there's somebody else involved for them to do something for me. Is that positive or negative?
By you telling them that they can't take a picture, you are claiming a positive right.
Even though it's a negative, because it's like
you are requiring them to not take a picture. You are requiring something from them. They either
even if it's my body and
you don't have a right to the light beams that bounce off of your body that create an image. You just don't have a right to that.
The way to look at it is they're not using your body when they take a picture. They're not infringing.
You
the
still
freedom
have
of your
it.
body.
You can use your body still any way you want. It didn't take anything away from you.
So the vision, okay, because it's the vision of my body and my image, that the vision itself makes it a positive because it's not actually mine, it's the light bouncing off of me.
Well, no, that isn't what makes it a positive. What makes it a positive is you're saying that out of this natural surroundings of something that they have a right to look at, you're out in public,
Right
they're
to
not
look
breaking.
at, not right to take an image of and save for their
Why
own.
not? You don't have that
Because-
claim on their body. That's how they choose to use their body. It's not an aggression.
Okay, because the subject was public, you're correct on that point.
Right. They didn't break into your
Okay,
house.
let's take this one step further. I'm in my house and there's a window involved. I don't know the window is open or they're actually trying to spy on my house and take a picture of me from there. Is that voyeurism or is that still positive?
It's voyeurism and it's probably creepy and immoral, but you chose to reveal your face to the world by leaving your windows open, and they don't violate your rights by taking a picture of you.
Unless they're on your property. I mean, I'm assuming they're taking the picture from the road.
Maybe.
If they're on your property, then they're trespassing.
Let me try. Let me try one more thing with you, and not to force you to agree to it, but just to, maybe something to take away and think about it after we're done.
Because I'm also wrapping my head around it. So
No,
I get it.
Let
me give you just one thought scenario.
But keep going.
Let me give you one scenario to just think about. Okay.
All right.
You're probably familiar with the phenomena of people living in neighborhoods where there's restrictive covenants. They all agree in a certain neighborhood on certain limitations on how they can build their house and things like that, right?
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Like I'm in a neighborhood and you can't build a pig farm on your house, and you can't build a house with a garage on the front, for example.
Right.
You have to build on the back. Now, that's a restriction on my right to do what I want with my property, but it's legitimate because I agreed to it by a contract with everyone else.
Right, because everybody else was involved in that one.
Correct. So that's in the law, that's called a negative easement or a negative servitude. So my neighbors don't have the right to use my house. They can't come in it and have a party, but they can stop me from using it in certain ways because I agreed to give them that right. So I've distributed some of my rights of control over my house to my neighbors. You understand that?
Okay. So are you in favor of that or against that?
Neither one, but it's totally legitimate under the law, because
All right.
people have a right to use their property as they want. They have a right to make contracts about it. Okay. Now,
Okay.
if the government simply passed a law tomorrow, and they said, all my neighbor, like let's say I live in an area, and we don't have this agreement, so I can build my house. I can paint my house orange if I want. I can make an ugly house, right?
Right.
I can let the grass go tall. I don't have to mow it every 2 weeks, whatever, right? I have that natural right because it's my property, right?
All right. Perfect.
Because I did not consent to a contractual agreement giving that right to other people, right?
But you didn't do that for other people, so yes.
But if the government passed a law saying, you can't build a certain house on your own property if your neighbors don't approve. If they passed that law, that would be a taking of my property rights, because it would be giving that negative servitude to my neighbors, even though they didn't buy it from me. It just gives it to them. So it takes some of my property rights away from me. Do you understand the difference
All right.
between? So a negative servitude limitation on what I can do with my property is legitimate if I consent to it, but it's not legitimate if I don't consent to it. Do you see that?
All right. Okay. I guess I see where you're coming from on that.
It's analogous to the difference between rape and sex, voluntary sex. If a woman consents to a man having sex with her, it's legitimate because she owns her body. He has decided to give permission to someone else to use her body for 30 minutes, right?
All right.
But if she doesn't consent, we call that rape, and the guy can be shot, right?
Well,
So do you see how the difference in
the
these
law.
situations? The difference is a matter of consent, whether the owner of property consents or not. And the problem with patent and copyright law is that it does the second thing. It gives people on the outside of my property a right to tell me how I cannot use it, even though I didn't contractually agree to that limitation on my property. That's ultimately the problem with patent and copyright law. So I don't want you to, I mean, this is high level stuff, but that's ultimately the case against it. It's a taking of my property rights.
All right. Here is my question then. If you have the contractual thing amongst the people that you said you were neither for or against,
well, I'm for it as a person. I have one. I like it.
I understand.
But as a libertarian, I'm just neutral.
As a libertarian, though, you agree that if the people should be the ones to take care of their problems. Yes or no?
Depends on what kind of problem you're talking about.
Well, okay.
Yeah, I don't know what that
But we're talking about the choices of what I want to do with my property. Yes or no?
Every owner has the right to do what they want with property.
Right.
Yes.
All right. So if you get into a contract that says, okay, no planting poisonous weeds, even though if they're pretty in your lawn, stuff like that. And what in the heck, I mean, it's stuff like this, but let's get back into the IP argument. When you have stuff like this and you have a personal consent of saying, this is what I want my work and what I want people to do with my work. How do you enforce that when you're with people and you don't have a government about what you want to do?
You would have to have a contract. That's the thing. You would have to have a contract with them where
how do you enforce the contract?
Well, that's going beyond kind of how something. I mean, this isn't on how an anarchy would work. That's going way. And I'd be more than glad to have that show at some point. But that does go way.
If that's too off topic, I'll relent on that one. But that's one of my main concerns.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind answering those questions as to how rights enforcement would operate in an anarchy, but that really would be a show all on its own. And, I have no problem.
Libertarianism, not necessarily just anarchy.
Well, not all libertarians want to dissolve government entirely.
Well, here's the thing. You want minimal government.
I don't want any.
Exactly. Well, I mean, okay. Some libertarians want minimal government. Other libertarians want no government.
Well, I'm not going to quibble on terminology. We're really talking about the state and not government, but I get what you're saying. I tend to want to be really, really precise in my language, but I understand what you're saying. But yeah, that is far afield, though. No libertarians deny that rights need to be enforced. The method of enforcement is different amongst libertarians, yes. But
Yeah,
no
so the
libertarians...
answer is, yeah. So whatever mechanism enforces contract and law would enforce these contracts, whether it's private or even a minimal government.
Okay,
So
you still believe
but
in
you have to have a
contract.
contract.
You still
Of
believe
course.
in contract. Okay.
Of
Okay,
course.
okay. That helps the situation a little bit, even though I don't know how you're going to enforce those contracts. But that's an argument for another time. Because safety, especially when it comes to your own work, and trying to decide what sort of things you want to let people do with that work. Even if you have a contract, and if the government's not the one running it, how do you do a contract saying, I don't want my work to be published on the internet, even though it's a painting, and have people follow that? Because you say it can't be.
So let me give you an example. I think I know where you're thinking. So if I rent you a car, like I'm Avis and I rent you a car,
Okay.
I only let you use that car for certain purposes. Like you can drive it within a radius. You can't paint the car. You can't sell it. You can't destroy it. And then you have to give it back to me in 2 days, something like that, right?
Right.
Now, that's easy. That's fairly easy to enforce, and that works right now under the given property rights and contract law system. Now, suppose you sell a book to someone, and before you sell the book, everyone who buys the book, you make them sign a contract saying, I promise not to upload it to the internet, and I promise not to make copies of it. I believe that contract is totally legitimate and should be enforced. But the problem is, unlike the car, information has a character that if someone violates the contract and they do upload it to the internet, now that information has been uploaded to the internet and it is too late to undo it. It's too late to get the information back. And other people, third parties who are not privy to your contract, they don't violate your contract if they copy that information because they didn't sign the contract with you. So the problem with copyright is that you can't build it on contract because contracts only affect the people you make. It doesn't affect third parties.
Because there's no way to enforce the first one in the process.
No, you
No,
can
there is a way
enforce
to
the
enforce it.
first
It's called
one.
copyright law.
How do you enforce the first one?
Oh, well, again, that's beyond the scope of what I mean.
Right, it
That's
really...
just how you.
No,
Okay.
Sarah,
Okay.
it's laughing a little bit like that is being a little bit disrespectful. It really is kind of...
I apologize.
That's okay. I know, we all get very passionate.
I apologize.
No, we all get passionate. Okay, well, I think we've come to an impasse, but maybe an understanding.
We both see each other's point of view, even
Yes.
though we don't agree with it. And
Right, and
that's
sometimes
what
that's all you can
Libertarian
ask.
is getting here.
Yep. Now, okay, well, I'm going to let you go.
Did people learn about your point of view? Yes or
Yeah.
no?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
We totally succeeded on what we were both trying
Yes.
to do.
All right, awesome, Sarah. You have a good night. Dave had some questions about
You
fraud
too.
that I think are real important that we'll
Right
get to.
on.
You have an awesome night. Bye-bye.
You too.
Okay, let me see if I can figure out how to get us back here. Yay, okay. So Dave had some questions, and we'll probably conclude with this because otherwise we could probably keep you all night, about fraud. And people in chat were doing a really good job of letting him know that you don't need IP because there's already fraud laws. So I'm trying to find his original question here. If maybe Dave could type it out again, but I guess the classic thing would be to take a book that somebody wrote and say you wrote it and put your name on it, and and the value is in deceiving people.
So not only do you not need copyright to stop fraud because we already have fraud law, but it doesn't stop fraud because copyright only stops copying. It doesn't require a showing of fraud, and lots of works that are out of copyright could be fraudulently used, and they're not stopped by it anyway. So people often get these laws confused, and it's not completely their fault because these are statutory, complicated, specialized, arcane schemes that are intentionally complicated so that people like me have to go to law school and do it and get paid money for doing something that shouldn't have to be done. But so people often mix up plagiarism and fraud with copying. So they think that if you're against copyright, you're for fraud, but they don't understand that fraud and contract and plagiarism have nothing to do with these laws. So for example, right now, I think Moby Dick and Shakespeare, all these works are public domain in the Bible. And so people are totally free right now to copy the Bible, an old version of it, and even to copy it and put their name on it if they want to. Now, if you put your name on the Bible and you try to sell it on Amazon as, Karen Ann Harlos's New Testament, you're free to do that. But no one's going to buy it because they know that you didn't write it, and they're going to wonder what else you changed, and you're going to look like a joke. And if you do it and you deceive someone, they could potentially have a case of fraud against you, but that has nothing to do with copyright. So it's just a confusion that saying the law that gets closest to fraud is trademark law, but even that doesn't require showing of fraud because trademark law says you can't use a mark to identify your product if it's confusingly similar to someone else's mark. And by confusingly similar, they mean if it confuses the customer. And that is kind of what we mean by fraud. If you confuse the customer, if you deceive them about the nature of your goods. So if I sell someone a Rolex that's not a Rolex, and I pretend that it's a Rolex, and they pay me $10,000 for it, I have defrauded that person. Except most people know that if they want to spend $10,000 on a Rolex, they're going to go to a store in the mall and buy it because they're spending that much money. They're not going to want to take the chance of they're getting a fraud. And on the other hand, if they buy a knockoff Rolex for $20 from a guy selling them out of his coat jacket or the back of a van on the streets of New York, they know that it's not a real Rolex and they are not defrauded. But trademark law would stop that too because it hurts the reputation rights of Rolex, the company, even though it doesn't defraud them and it doesn't defraud anyone else. So there's no fraud that's an issue here. I mean, and plagiarism, by the way, is not fraudulent either. It's just dishonesty or breaching a contract between like a student and the university, or between an author submitting an article to a journal. You're violating the contract maybe, and they can kick you out of the school if you're a student, or the publisher can reject your article or make fun of you, or maybe you get a bad reputation. But plagiarism is not even fraud in most cases, I would say. It's just slimy, seedy, dishonest behavior, and you get the reputation for being a hack.
Right. And fraud law already sufficiently covers it. And I think where a lot of libertarians start to get really upset is they're confusing the two and thinking that this is condoning fraud and there'd be absolutely nothing that could be done against fraud. And that's not at all it. Most of the objections I hear against IP are really just concerns over fraud. And we share those concerns. That's not the issue, not the issue at all.
And 99.9% of the copyright infringement cases and the things people are worried about when they favor IP law is when you copy someone's work and their name is on it. Like if I copy the Harry Potter book, J.K. Rowling's name will be on it. That is illegal under copyright law. That's what people oppose when they favor copyright law. So if the people that are concerned about fraud and contract would agree with me and you to abolish copyright law and just keep the part that stops fraud, I'm okay with that. So then all we're left with is fraud law, which already exists, and we're already in favor of that. So fine, let's get rid of all the non-fraud preventing parts of copyright law, and we're all happy.
Yeah. Yes. So I'm going to check to see here if there is anything else. Yeah, Dave asked about trademarks, and I think we agreed at the beginning that gets a lot more complicated, and we were more going to deal with copyright and patent type things. Because you do get into fraud a lot more with trademark. I think that's ultimately what trademark comes down to, is deceiving somebody as to the identity of the vendor or whatever you might want to call it.
The problem is trademark law is worded this way. If you sell a product that is likely to confuse the average consumer, then it's trademark violation. But likely to confuse is not the same as proving that there was actual fraud, number one. And number two, the trademark law gives the right to sue to the trademark owner, not to the allegedly defrauded or confused consumer. So in fraud law, the person defrauded has the right to sue.
Right.
So if I sell a knockoff product, I don't know, like I sell a fake Mercedes to someone, then they should have the right to sue me for contract breach or for fraud. But trademark law gives that right to the guy that was selling his product. So it basically steals the right to sue from the victimized party and gives it to some other party that doesn't really have a claim.
Right, it's kind of like what the state does with when it's the people versus whatever. It gets crazy.
It's the same thing. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't want to keep you all night. We are almost at 2 hours, and I truly, truly appreciate your time. And I think gave a lot of people a lot of things to think about, and I'm hoping at least some minds got changed. So I really, really do thank you. If there's any concluding words you had or any resources you would like to refer people to if they want to get more information, because I know you've got a book, there are other books, you got a website, like pimp it out, man.
Okay, so my site that collects the IP-related stuff is c4sif.org, the number 4, sif.org, which stands for Center for the Study of Innovative Freedom. I've got tons of resources there. My first treatment of this is against intellectual property, but that was 20 years ago now. I'm going to write a brand new book from scratch, probably in a couple years, and it's going to be called Copy This Book, and it'll be a new defense of the IP abolition position. And one more thing, so for people that are Bitcoiners, I am a member of a group called the Open Crypto Alliance. That's opencryptoalliance.org. And it's some patent attorneys and technologists and Bitcoiners and business people. We band together. We're trying to fight the threat to the Bitcoin ecosystem posed by some people who are amassing patents on crypto technology and threatening to sue people for just doing Bitcoin things, which is a big threat to Bitcoin, which is a threat to freedom, because Bitcoin is one of the greatest tools for freedom we have emerging, just like the internet was. And by the way, copyright threatens internet freedom as well. So if you're interested in defending Bitcoin from the patent threat, just look up Open Crypto Alliance.
Hey, awesome. All right, now just one thing I wanted to close with. I think you know, Stefan, or maybe you don't, but I think I mentioned it to you, but I don't know if my audience knows. Back in my original journey, when moving along the libertarian spectrum, it was your article that pushed me over the edge into anarchy. So you get credit for the final push, though a lot of friends got me over to the edge. But I think it was, I always get the title a little bit wrong, but it was about the moral irrelevance of the impossibility of anarcho-libertarianism.
That was like a later blog post that kind of was about that. But the article was what it means to be an anarcho-capitalist.
Yeah, but it was that later one that pushed me over the edge. It really did, because my argument always was, I don't think it's feasible, until I finally realized how dumb of an objection, at least for me as a hard deontologist, how dumb of an ejection that was. So yeah, you in my announcement post that I was no longer a minarchist, I had your article right there. So my husband might have a few words to say to you, but yeah, if you didn't know, now everyone here knows.
Well, we all learn from each other, which is what I love about this movement. And these ideas are not ours, right? This is just building upon the kind of complicated interwoven fabric of liberty, basically. And so, good. I'm glad. That's good.
All right, awesome. I'm going to let you go, let everyone else go. Thank you so much. And thank you again, Stefan. You have an awesome night.
Thanks for Sarah for putting up with us.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because